The forgotten origin. Before Mickey, before Donald, before Goofy, there was Pete. Long before Disney built an empire of heroes, there was already a villain, a loud, one-eyed, cigar-chewing brute who made audiences laugh, groan, and cheer all at once. It's 1925, the Roaring Twenties. Walt Disney is experimenting with the Alice comedies, an early blend of live action and animation. In Alice Solves the Puzzle, the 14th entry in the series, we meet Bootleg Pete, a nasty, bear-like troublemaker obsessed with stealing crossword puzzles. It's simple, it's crude, but it's the moment Disney's first villain is born. Pete appears shirtless, pantsless, and completely animalistic. A wild creature with a peg leg and a snarl that would later become legend. That peg leg wasn't just an odd detail, it was the visual symbol of imperfection and menace that made him stand out in a world of cute cartoon animals. In later shorts like Alice Picks the Champ and Alice's Tin Pony, Pete starts to change. He wears pants for the first time, a tiny moment that marks a massive shift in Disney history. He becomes one of the very first anthropomorphic animals to ever wear clothes. That simple idea, that cartoon animals could look human, would reshape Disney's entire future style. By 1927, Pete had appeared in 19 Alice shorts and cemented himself as animation's original antagonist. He was mean, funny, unpredictable, and he was about to follow Walt Disney into a whole new universe, the Oswald makeover. After the Alice era came Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, Disney's first true cartoon star, and Pete came with him. Rebranded as Putrid Pete, he appeared in the 7th Oswald short, The Ocean Hop, 1927. Now taller, skinnier, and more stylized, he ditched his bear look for a cleaner cartoon shape, with that same hat and a refined peg leg that made him instantly recognizable. In many ways, this was Pete's first real upgrade. He wore vests, gloves, and accessories, the prototype of what would later define Disney's entire design language. More importantly, Pete was now a foil, a true antagonist created to challenge the hero again and again. He was the template that every future Disney villain would follow. Pete appeared in 10 Oswald shorts between 1927 and 1928, each time slightly different. New hat shapes, new body types, sometimes with a leg, sometimes without. But behind the scenes, trouble was brewing. Universal owned Oswald, not Disney. And when they took the character away, Walt lost almost everything, except for Pete, and that loss pushed Walt to create someone new, a mouse named Mickey. And Pete would follow him there too, the Mickey transformation. It's 1928. Steamboat Willie is about to change animation forever. But before that, Disney needed a villain, and Pete was ready. In Mickey's second short, The Gallopin' Gaucho, Pete returned as a towering, round-bellied bandit. He was no longer a bear, and he was a cat, redesigned to contrast Mickey's small mouse frame. He kept his overalls, his hat, and his grin, but he was slicker, almost human in his movements. This era defined the Pete most people remember. Big hands, broad chest, short temper, and for the first time, he had a voice, a deep, booming growl that sounded like every bad boss you've ever had. By 1930s Cactus Kid, he'd earned the name Peg Leg Pete, and by the mid-30s, he was showing up everywhere. Mickey's Service Station, the Chain Gang, and the Dog Napper. He faced Mickey, Donald, and Goofy, becoming the only villain to threaten all three icons at once. Animators like Norm Ferguson and Fred Moore kept refining him. Rounder body, expressive eyebrows, smoother motion. He was funny but dangerous, cartoonish but real. By the end of the 1930s, Pete was no longer just a villain. He was a personality, Disney's first true recurring character and a mirror to every hero that followed. The power villain. As the 1940s began, Pete was no longer just Mickey's bully. He was the face of authority gone bad. He had a booming voice now, thanks to Billy Bletcher, whose deep growl gave Pete that unforgettable edge. In Officer Duck 1939, Pete faced off against Donald in one of their most hilarious battles. Then, in The Riveter and Timber, he became Donald's workplace nightmare, a boss who barked orders and exploded at the smallest mistake. This version of Pete wasn't a criminal anymore. He was your worst boss, your mean neighbor, your angry cop. He symbolized the rise of order and authority in American life, and Disney used him to parody it. The animation itself evolved too. Thanks to Fred Moore's squash and stretch technique, Pete finally moved like a real heavyweight. His steps had weight, his punches landed, his eyebrows arched with emotion. Color also transformed him. In Moving Day, 1936, Pete appeared in color for the first time, his black fur, blue pants, and pale face giving him a bold, cinematic look. He wasn't scary anymore, he was entertaining. You could almost love to hate him. Then came a weird twist. For a few years, Pete was still appearing in Universal's Oswald cartoons, at the same time he was starring in Disney's. Because of murky copyright laws, both studios legally owned him. That means, for a brief window in the 1930s, Pete was a Disney and Universal character at the same time, a strange, forgotten footnote in cartoon history. By the early 1940s, Pete's design was smoother, his mannerisms more polished, and his personality fully locked in. He wasn't changing anymore. He was evolving with the times, the war years. Then came World War II, and Pete, like everyone else, went to war. In 6 different propaganda shorts between 1942 and 1943, Pete appeared as Donald Duck's army superior, a drill sergeant who tormented Donald with endless commands and humiliations. For the first time, Pete's cruelty had a purpose. It was funny, but it also reflected the harshness of real military life. In Donald Gets Drafted and Sky Trooper, Pete yells, bullies, and pushes Donald to his breaking point, all with that booming Billy Bletcher voice echoing across the base. He even appeared as a Nazi spy in a 1943 Mickey Mouse comic strip, showing how deeply Disney was willing to weave him into wartime narratives. But when the war ended, the tone shifted. Pete returned in The New Neighbor, 1952, and Canvas-Back Duck, 1953, not as a villain but as a suburban jerk, a normal guy next door who just happened to be a pain. This was a new kind of Pete. Smaller stakes, bigger laughs. His final classic short came in 1954's The Lone Chipmunks, where he played a Wild West outlaw named Black Pete. It was the end of an era, the curtain call of Disney's first villain. After 1954, Pete vanished. Disney moved on to fairy tales and theme parks, leaving the old troublemaker behind. For nearly 30 years, the company's oldest character was completely forgotten. The comeback. It took almost 3 decades, but Pete wasn't done. In 1983, Disney released Mickey's Christmas Carol, the first Mickey short in 30 years. And Pete made his grand return as the ghost of Christmas yet to come. Huge, shadowy, and surrounded by smoke, he looms over Scrooge McDuck in one of the film's darkest scenes. For fans who hadn't seen him since the 1950s, it was a chilling comeback, a reminder that Disney's first villain still had power. That appearance reignited interest in classic characters. Pete started popping up again, in comic books, merchandise, and eventually in DuckTales, 1987. There he wore many hats, Sharky, Captain Pietro, even Genghis Khan, each version a nod to his shape-shifting history. But Pete's biggest reinvention came in 1992 with Goof Troop. For the first time ever, Pete wasn't a villain. He was a neighbor, a father, and a businessman. He lived in the suburbs next to Goofy, always scheming, always grumpy, but oddly relatable. This was the human side of Pete, the one who bragged about his boat, argued with his wife Peg, and embarrassed his son PJ. He wasn't evil anymore, he was us. Insecure, competitive, flawed, and funny. Voiced by Jim Cummings, Pete's new tone was smoother, cockier, and more modern. He became a character audiences loved to see lose, but couldn't help enjoying along the way. That same version carried into A Goofy Movie, 1995, and an extremely goofy movie, 2000, where Pete and Goofy's friendship and rivalry hit new emotional highs. Pete had gone from cartoon villain to 3D character, and he was finally more than just the bad guy. The digital age. The new millennium brought Pete into a completely different world. Digital animation, video games, and global franchises. And somehow, the oldest Disney character of all time kept evolving right alongside them. In the early 2000s, Pete became the greedy landlord in House of Mouse, a self-aware TV series where Mickey and friends ran a nightclub for Disney characters. Pete owned the building and constantly tried to shut the club down, a perfect modern twist on his authority villain persona. He wasn't just mean anymore, he was corporate, the kind of guy who'd evict you for being 5 minutes late on rent. Then, in 2004, Pete made a grand cinematic return in Mickey, Donald, Goofy, The Three Musketeers. Here he was back to full villain form, complete with his peg leg, his first in over 50 years. He even got his own musical number, Petey's King of France. King of France! Where he literally sang about his evil plans, finally earning what every great Disney villain gets, a song. But that wasn't the end. In 2006, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse introduced Pete to a new generation, now in full CGI. This Pete wasn't evil at all. He was mischievous, clumsy, and sometimes even helpful. Designed for preschool audiences, this version turned Pete into more of a pest than a threat. A cartoon cat who just couldn't help but mess things up. And then came Get a Horse in 2013, one of the cleverest Mickey projects ever made. The short begins in black and white, with Pete drawn in his original 1928 design. Then, halfway through, the animation literally bursts into color and 3D. And we see Pete's oldest and newest versions collide on screen for the first time. It was Disney's way of saying, he's still here, 90 years later, and he's still the same Pete. Modern Mickey shorts from 2013 onward, especially the Paul Rudish series, pushed Pete's design even further. He became chunkier, more stylized, more expressive, almost like a living tribute to every version before him. He had his old peg leg, his overalls, his hat, and that unmistakable swagger. He wasn't just a character anymore. He was history in motion. Outside the cartoons, Pete also conquered the gaming world. In Kingdom Hearts, he became a recurring villain, a bumbling yet powerful agent of chaos in Disney's crossover universe. In Epic Mickey, he was reborn as a tragic figure, a guardian of forgotten tunes, representing both the danger and the nostalgia of Disney's early days. For the first time, Pete wasn't just comic relief or pure evil, he was symbolic, the embodiment of Disney's past itself, the legacy of Pete. So what does it mean that Disney's oldest character is still around, almost 100 years later? Pete started as a crude, peg-legged bear trying to steal a crossword puzzle, and ended up as a fully fleshed-out personality, bridging eras, technologies, and generations. He's fought Mickey on a steamboat, yelled at Donald in the army, raised a family next to Goofy, and even battled Keyblade warriors in a video game multiverse. No other Disney character, not even Mickey himself, has reinvented as many times, across as many formats. Pete's evolution mirrors Disney's evolution. When animation was new, he was rough and wild. When sound came in, he found his voice. When color arrived, he became expressive and bold. When storytelling matured, so did he. And when technology turned digital, Pete marched right into 3D like he'd been there all along. What makes Pete fascinating is that he never stopped changing, but he never stopped being Pete, the eternal antagonist, the flawed authority, the mirror to every hero Disney ever made. He's proof that even villains grow, that even the loudest, meanest, most chaotic character can adapt, survive, and keep entertaining almost a century later. In 1925, he was a bear with no clothes and a peg leg. In 2025, he's a 3D cat with a full emotional range and a history deeper than most studios' entire libraries. So the next time you see Mickey, Goofy, or Donald dealing with that big, loud, cigar-loving cat, remember, you're not just watching another cartoon villain. You're watching Disney's first ever character, still standing after 94 years, and if that doesn't earn him legend status, nothing will. And that's the complete evolution of Pete, Disney's oldest and most overlooked character. From a silent era bear to a modern-day legend, he's outlasted almost everyone. I'll be breaking down more classic cartoon histories just like this one, so if you love these deep dives, make sure you stick around. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.